Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In the year 1944, in Poland, we witness a family being separated due to the war. Young Eric despairs as he sees his mother being taken in another direction and even tries to follow her, but the guards hold him back. As the gates close, Eric cries and reaches out his hand as if to reach his mother when suddenly, the gate bars begin to tremble and are pulled towards him, leaving the guards startled. Eric reveals himself as a mutant but is knocked out. Meanwhile, in Westchester, New York, in a mansion, we see a little boy waking up. His name is Charles. He goes to the kitchen and sees his mother, but being able to read thoughts, he finds out that person is not his mother. Suddenly, the woman starts to transform into a blue little girl. Her name is Raven, and both are young mutants. Charles, being a good boy, offers her food, and since the girl has no one, he offers his friendship. Back in Poland, Mr. Sebastian talks with Eric and even offers him chocolate, but before that, he asks him to do what he did in the field earlier. The boy tries to replicate what he did but can't move the metals on the table. To excite him to do what he did again, Sebastian brings Eric's mother to the room, and with a gun, he threatens to shoot her if the boy can't move the coin on the table. Eric tries but fails, so Sebastian shoots Eric's mother. Angry, the young man awakens his powers, showing Sebastian that his fury brings forth his abilities. Sebastian becomes concerned as Eric, using his powers, angrily crushes the steel objects around him and kills the soldiers by squeezing their helmets. Sebastian is pleased with this because he now possesses a very powerful human weapon, a mutant capable of manipulating steel or even destroying it. Years later, we see Eric as an adult handling the coin he received on the day he lost his mother and discovered his powers. He lives alone in Geneva, but his years were spent researching Mr. Sebastian, the man who bitterly marked his life. In England, at a bar, we see Charles and his friend Raven in human appearance. Charles approaches a woman named Amy, who has two eye colors. Charles, possessing mental powers, recognizes her as a mutant, and even tries to flirt with her, but Raven approaches and also shows being able to change her eye color. Charles, seeing that Raven didn't like the encounter, decides to go back home, with Raven showing her disappointment at how he acted. At home, Raven, looking at herself, asks if Charles finds her attractive, and he says yes. However, he can't be with her as he considers her as a sister, and asks for time to study for the genetic mutation teacher formation exam. The scene changes, and we see Eric going to a bank. He talks to the manager and shows a gold bar with the Nazi mark. The man threatens to call the police because that gold brings back memories of a past bathed in blood. Eric says his people were forced to obtain that gold, and he knows much of that wealth the bank keeps for its clients, so he asks where he can find a specific man. The manager can't tell, but Eric forces him to say while taking the silver from the man's tooth. After finding out the location, he threatens the manager if he wants to tell about his visit there. In Las Vegas, we meet Agent Moira, observing Colonel Hendry entering one of the clubs of the big communist bosses. Seeing some women in underwear entering the place, Moira takes off her clothes and decides to enter disguised. Meanwhile, the general goes to see Sebastian. Soon assistant Emma fetches him and takes him along with the many women, saying the entertainment at the party is them. Moira manages to enter and dodges the men who want her, saying the colonel called her. When she goes to the booth where he is with Emma, she realizes they have disappeared. When she sits to check the booth, she discovers a passage to another hidden room. In the meeting room, Sebastian, who appears younger than years ago, talks to Henry questioning why he refused to reposition the nuclear missiles in Turkey, and the colonel says it would guarantee a nuclear war. Sebastian, not having his support, shows in a rude way that he is not asking. He orders a mutant to use his wind powers and throws the general against the wall, and the noise alerts Moira. She looks through the crack and sees Sebastian showing the mutants, where Emma has mental powers and her body is shielded with crystals. Suddenly, the mutant Azazel arrives out of nowhere and, following the order, takes the colonel by teleporting him to the army's command center. Moira tries to alert her superiors, but the man doesn't believe her since the colonel is present at the meeting and agrees to reposition the missiles. In the city of Villa Gesell, Argentina, Eric goes to a local bar in search of a man who was involved in his sad childhood. He joins a table where the man is and drinks a bit. When he shows his tattooed number on his arm, he shows the men that he is a survivor of the Nazi massacre. One of them then tries to kill Eric using a knife, but Eric quickly takes it from him and asks if they will help him. However, they say they only follow orders, so Eric injures the man's hand. When he is threatened by the waiter with a gun, he uses his powers and makes the man shoot the other, kills him with the knife, and quickly grabs the blade and wounds the man at the table again. He says he is looking for the wicked man who made him what he is today, but not getting answers, he finishes off the last man. Charles celebrates his approval at a bar, but suddenly Moira shows up and calls him to talk. When he reads her thoughts and sees what she saw earlier, he says he will help her in whatever she needs. On one of Sebastian's yachts, the colonel begins to suspect him, so he threatens him with a grenade. However, Sebastian approaches him and detonates the grenade himself, but the explosion is controlled. Thus, the reason why Sebastian is still so young, even after many years, is revealed. He explains that he absorbs energy to remain young, this is part of his power, and to finish the conversation, Sebastian shows what he does with the energy he absorbs, then touches the colonel and disintegrates him. At the CIA headquarters, Charles explains about the existence of people with mutations in their bodies to the agency's bosses. They don't believe Professor Charles's words, however Charles begins to say what they were thinking while he was talking, and then presents himself as a mutant, capable of reading thoughts. Knowing about the missiles they are repositioning in Turkey, they are scared and will take action on it, thinking Charles is a spy. Suddenly, Raven transforms into one of the agents in the room, also showing herself to be a mutant, and leaves them stunned showing her form. They are arrested and put under Agent Mib's power. Moira talks to her partner about her superior's lack of concern about the imminent threat, when suddenly everyone around her freezes, except her. Then Charles's voice speaks in her mind and asks her to meet him in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Mib shows interest in the mutants' abilities, saying he always knew of their existence in the world but was never believed when he spoke about it, however now he can support Charles and Moira. Moira finds them and then they go somewhere else. On Sebastian's yacht, Eric arrives silently, but he didn't come to hide, he soon introduces himself to Sebastian. Emma, also able to communicate through thoughts, confuses Eric's mind, leaving him defenseless. She protects Sebastian and throws Eric into the water. Suddenly the Coast Guard approaches them, then Emma notices Charles's presence and blocks his vision. Sebastian's subordinate mutant attacks the approaching guards using small hurricanes. Eric soon reappears and uses the anchor chains to hit Sebastian's boat, causing it to descend to the lower level and enter his submarine. He tries to lift the submarine, but ends up being pulled down to the bottom of the water. Charles, seeing that he would drown, jumps into the water and grabs Eric, asking him to release the submarine. Knowing his pain and anger, Charles uses his powers and forces him to give up revenge at that moment. Sometime later, the group arrives at the CIA's secret base, known as Division X, run by Mib. They enter the place and meet Hank, a very intelligent scientist. Charles ruins the disguise and ends up saying that Hank is also a mutant. Then he shows that he has a foot hand and shows his abilities, similar to a monkey's. Raven approaches him and shows admiration for such power. On the submarine, Sebastian shows off his new acquisition, a helmet that makes him immune to the power of a telepath. Emma tries to enter his mind, but fails. Back to Hank, we see him talking to Raven. He says that from a very young age, he decided that he would find the cure for his mutation, or at least make them more like normal people. Raven asks if the serum he is developing would work on her, leaving her with the permanent appearance of how she is now, a beautiful young woman. He says probably yes, so she allows Hank to take her blood for testing. She approaches to kiss him, but Eric arrives interrupting the romantic mood and says that if he were Raven, he wouldn't change anything about her. Then he steals CIA files about Sebastian and decides to leave, but Charles stops him saying he knows what Eric went through, and says he wants to help him. Charles allows Eric to leave, however he says the enemy has his friends, and affirms that Eric may have help and friends if he decides to stay. The next day, Mib talks to Charles and shows Hank's new invention, which turned a radar into a transmitter, where Charles will be able to enhance his brain powers and find more mutants around the world, in partnership with the CIA. Suddenly, Eric enters the room saying that mutants may not want to be found by the agents, however he and Charles will do it alone. Then, the mutants go to what Hank calls the Cerebro, and Charles is placed in the center, wearing a helmet with neurotransmitters. When Hank turns on the device, Charles can see thousands of people and identify the mutants. Days later, they go to a nightclub and pay a dancer for a private dance, however alone with her, Charles and Eric show what they can do, then the young woman named Angel shows her wings, making her capable of flying. The two continue the search for more mutants, like a prisoner named Alex, who prefers to always stay in solitary. They also go to a bar and meet with Logan, but he tells them to leave, not wanting to talk. On Sebastian's submarine, Emma suspects something, as she knows that Charles is recruiting mutants, but she cannot find him. Sebastian, in his room, which has an energy core, asks Emma to go to Russia, while he takes care of the mutants. At Mib's agency, we see the young recruits. Among the ones already known are Darwin, who can adapt to any situation, Banshee, who can emit powerful and destructive sound waves, Angel shows her wings and she also spits out a corrosive ball. When it's Alex's turn to show what he can do, he goes outside and asks the others to move away, then he shoots cutting and destructive energy circles from his body. When Charles, Eric, and Moira visit the young mutants, they find them having fun and making a mess in the room. Questioned about what they did, Raven introduces herself to everyone there. She will be called Mystique. Alex is called the Destroyer. Charles is Professor Xavier, and Eric is Magneto. However, the party of the young people disappointed the leaders. The next day, the leaders go on a mission, and when they stop at a military checkpoint, they are forced to undergo an inspection. The soldiers check the truck compartment, but find nothing. After that, it is revealed that Charles deceived them with his power, making them not see them. Then, we see the group observing General Russo's house, however Emma arrives alone. Charles uses a soldier to listen to the conversation between the two, but does not have enough information. They want to abort the mission, however Eric does not want to let Sebastian's right-hand man escape, who, alone with the general, tries to seduce him with his body. Eric takes action and incapacitates the soldiers from reacting to his entry into the house. The CIA decides to abort the mission, but Charles says he will not leave Eric alone. Meanwhile, the general has fun with an illusion of Emma dating him in bed, however she is watching him. Soon Charles and Eric enter the room, and the general tries to shoot, but Charles puts him to sleep. Emma transforms her body into crystal and thus Charles cannot read her thoughts. She tries to escape, but the two dominate her and Eric traps her in the bed frame, and forces her to say where Sebastian is. She doesn't tell, so Eric forces the crystal from her neck and makes her return to normal. Charles then begins to read her mind, and sees Sebastian's plan, which is to start a nuclear war, where radiation would make them stronger, thus starting a reign over his power. Meanwhile, at the CIA, the young people are relaxing a bit, when they hear noises from outside, but don't see anything. Agent Mib also hears. Suddenly Azazel enters the room and kidnaps the guard and then Mib too. He takes them up high, and drops them to their death, along with the other men in the facility. Thus, Sebastian arrives to find the young mutants. He is surrounded by the other guards, however, the shots do nothing to him, not even a destructive missile, since he absorbs all the energy from the explosion, and then launches it back more destructively. Azazel kills the guards outside, and the hurricane destroys the Cerebro. The young people are stunned, scared by the mutants causing terror there. Next, Sebastian and the others surround them, however he talks to the mutants, offering a partnership, since a revolution is approaching, where, when humans find out about the mutants and the power they have, they will try to destroy them all. However, Sebastian offers a future where they can be sovereign against humanity. The first to accept is Angel, who goes with them. Darwin stops them and says he will go with them, however, he grabs Angel and protects her, while Alex shoots his power against the group and Sebastian. Unfortunately, it's energy, and Sebastian absorbs it without problems. Darwin tries to fight, but Sebastian dominates him and makes him swallow the energy that Alex sent against him, then he leaves. Darwin tries to adapt his body with the energy that is inside him, but unfortunately he is not able to, and ends up being destroyed. In Russia, Sebastian meets with the Russian general and tells him where he will place the nuclear missiles. When Charles and Eric arrive at the CIA, they see the destruction, and with this event they decide to end the team. However, the young mutants don't want to, and Eric says they need to get revenge. Charles then says they need to train their powers and knows a place where they can stay. At the American War Council, they analyze the situation of a possible war, since the Russians are sending nuclear warheads close to American territory. With this, they send a counterattack fleet, and the Russians and their council decide to do the same, thus beginning Sebastian's plan. Charles takes his team to the mansion that was left to him. The training begins, and Eric says that anger helped him increase his powers, but Charles warns him that it also almost killed him. Charles helps each member of the team to use their powers in the best possible way, and even though it seems impossible at first, over the days, they become more efficient. Alex gains an energy controller, which focuses his power on the center of his chest and makes him shoot a power beam. On the other hand, Banshee learns to control his sonic power, and with it and a glider, he can fly. When it's Eric's turn, Charles helps him control his thoughts, so he can use his powers correctly and become stronger than he imagines. Charles makes him remember a memory with his mother, and this awakens Eric, and he manages to turn a giant steel antenna towards him. Later, the group watches a statement from the president, where he says that due to the actions of the Soviet Union, they took drastic actions and, if necessary, will start the Third World War. The ship carrying the nuclear warheads is being followed by Sebastian's submarine, which is also paying attention to the news, and is happy that his plan is working. In Raven's room, Hank brings the samples that paralyze physical mutation. She questions him if they should hide. They have a conversation whether they will actually do that. Hank wants to, because then they can be accepted naturally in society, but Raven, who always hides her physical form, doesn't want to hide anymore. Charles and Eric talk about the war that will soon happen. Eric warns his friend that one day humanity will not differentiate mutants, seeing them as an enemy species. Charles doesn't want to believe that, even though Eric says that after the war, winning or not, they will be seen as a threat to the extinction of normal humans. Hank, looking at his different feet, injects the serum into himself. He observes that his studies were promising, seeing that his foot returns to that of a normal man. Suddenly, he starts to feel something, and soon he observes not only his foot, but his whole body transforming, his muscles and nails grow, and blue fur appears all over his body. When Eric returns to the room, he sees Raven lying on the bed, waiting for him to enjoy a night. Eric is not excited, but when Raven turns into Mystique, Eric approaches saying that in that way she is perfect, and kisses her, saying that she can be who she really is. The next morning, Charles goes to Hank's laboratory, and observes the mess of the place. However, he left instructions to the group of where to find him. They go to the airbase, and there they meet the new Hank, now with the appearance of a beast. He says that the serum did the opposite of what was planned, thus causing the cells of his body to enhance. Mystique says that he has surpassed himself, because now he is who he really is meant to be. Magneto congratulates Hank, however the beast, thinking it's an offense, grabs his neck and warns him not to insult him. In the scene near Cuba, we see the two fleets of ships, American and Russian, preparing for a possible war, in case the ship carrying the warheads crosses the determined limits. At the last minute, the Russian fleet asks the ship not to cross the ordered limits, however there are no answers. Suddenly Charles and his team arrive at the scene, and Professor Xavier using his powers tries to observe the interior of the cargo ship, however discovers that Azazel is there, and the crew is dead. If the Americans shoot, this will start a war, so Xavier makes a Russian soldier shoot a missile at the ship Azazel was dominating, thus showing that the Russians did not want a war. Charles's group suspects that Sebastian is nearby, but they are not identified on radar, so the group initiates a plan, where they will use Banshee's powers. He dives into the water and emits a sound wave, and manages to identify Sebastian's location. The same as in his room where his energy source, a nuclear reactor, is located. He connects to it and begins to absorb the energy, with the purpose of causing an explosion that would initiate a war between the two nations. Knowing Sebastian's location, Magneto uses his powers and begins to lift the submarine, showing everyone what was hidden beneath them. The mutant hurricane goes outside and unleashes a tornado against them, causing Magneto to release the submarine, which then crashes onto the beach. Meanwhile, Hank's ship begins to be destroyed, and it doesn't take long for it to crash onto the ground. Fortunately, the group is okay. However, Charles, who managed to read the mutant's mind, warns about what Sebastian is preparing. Beast and Alex confront Azazel, who teleports them to the fleet of ships, and Magneto easily enters the submarine in search of Sebastian. Meanwhile, the mutants fight among themselves, with Angel attacking Alex and then chasing Banshee. Magneto shuts down the reactor. Soon, Sebastian appears to him. Magneto enters the reactor chamber and, as a result, loses contact with Charles. Banshee rescues Alex, but in the escape, Angel shoots fireballs at his glider, causing him to crash. Angel tries to attack them, but Alex shoots his power at her and breaks one of her wings, also causing her to crash. On the beach, as Azazel prepares to kill Beast, Sebastian appears and orders him to stop. Hank surprises Azazel and knocks him unconscious. It is soon revealed to be Mystique using her transformation powers. Back in the protected chamber, Sebastian questions which side Magneto wants to be on and, with just a touch to the forehead, throws Eric against the walls. This creates an opening, and Charles manages to communicate with his friend. Magneto tries to trap Sebastian in the steel beams of the submarine, but the enemy's power is too great and, with his strength, he pushes the steel bar against Magneto. He says that together they can rule the world, as a superior and dominant race. Meanwhile, Magneto uses a steel cable and removes Sebastian's helmet. Soon Charles paralyzes him. Suddenly, Eric takes the helmet and puts it on, apologizing to Charles, which worries the professor because Eric has tremendous power, and now he can't stop him. Magneto takes the Nazi coin he carried, a symbol of his quest for revenge. He releases it into the air and pushes it against Sebastian's head. It goes through him and kills his enemy. Meanwhile, in the American Defense Council, they discuss having formed an alliance with the Russians and decide to unite and destroy the possible mutant threat once and for all. Magneto goes outside showing Sebastian's body. However, he tells his fellow mutants that the true enemy is the humans and shows what they are about to launch at them. Charles uses his powers and confirms what will soon happen. Moira tries to talk to her superiors to cancel the destruction orders, but she gets no response. The ships aim their guns and fire hundreds of missiles at the beach. Fortunately, Magneto, focused, paralyzes them all before impact, leaving the soldiers in shock at what they see. Unfortunately, Eric has a vengeful spirit, and concerned about what more humans might do to him and his kind, he targets the missiles back at the ships. Charles tries to convince him not to retaliate, but Magneto's fury causes him to launch the bombs back. The professor pushes Eric to make him drop the bombs, but Magneto is stronger and leaves him lying on the ground. Moira then starts shooting at him, but Magneto dodges, and unfortunately one of the bullets hits Charles's spine, causing him to scream in pain. Eric quickly goes to his friend and removes the bullet from his spine. Meanwhile, the missiles self-destruct in the air, leaving the soldiers relieved. Eric apologizes to Charles and, in his fury, strangles Moira with her iron necklace. However, Charles asks him to stop. They have a brief conversation and acknowledge that they have different purposes regarding living in society. Magneto gets up and tells the other mutants that they must form an alliance, unite against any human attack, and retaliate, but in an even more deadly way. Mystique approaches her childhood friend, and Charles, knowing her thoughts, bids her farewell as she wants to go with Eric. Sebastian's mutants join Magneto, and Azazel teleports them elsewhere. The remaining group tries to help the professor, but he says he no longer feels his legs. 4 months later, Charles talks to Moira outside his mansion, planning to turn the place into a school to shelter and teach mutants. Moira shows that she is on Charles's side and says she will never reveal the professor's whereabouts. Then they kiss. The professor, with deep sadness, has to erase some of her memories, making her forget the moments she experienced with him. Days later, Moira is questioned by her superiors about the professor, but she can hardly remember anything, including his whereabouts. Suddenly, a crash attracts everyone's attention in the room. We soon find out who was at the scene. We end up seeing Magneto, who has come to fetch the telepathic mutant Emma to join his team, and she agrees to join him.